Hello, I'm Essay, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
The year was 1970. Paul Samuelson, a towering figure in 20th century economics, published a seminal paper. Its title, The Fundamental Singularity Theorem for Non-Jointly Produced Multiple Inputs, immediately signals a deep dive into the intricacies of general equilibrium theory. At its heart lies a critical question regarding the Factor Price Equalization Theorem, a cornerstone of international trade theory, namely, under what precise conditions does this theorem, which predicts the convergence of factor prices across countries engaged in free trade, falter? The context of this inquiry is pivotal. Economic theory, at that time, grappled with the limitations of existing models. These models, frequently simplified, often assumed joint production or a limited number of inputs. They struggled to adequately address the complexities of real-world production processes, especially those characterized by multiple, independently utilized inputs. This deficiency had significant implications for international trade theory. It cast doubt on the robustness of predictions derived from the Heckscher-Ohlin model, a dominant framework that linked trade patterns of factor endowments such as labor and capital. This model, in its canonical form, leaned heavily on the assumption of factor price equalization. If this assumption failed, so too might the model's predictive power diminish, rendering trade policy recommendations based on its insights less reliable. Samuelson's contribution, the Fundamental Singularity Theorem, directly addressed these shortcomings. It offered a rigorous mathematical framework. The theorem established the conditions under which factor price equalization breaks down. This breakthrough was more than just a theoretical exercise. It allowed economists to precisely identify scenarios where trade would not lead to factor price convergence, offering a more nuanced understanding of the relationship between trade, production, and factor prices. The theorem delved into the constraints imposed by the interplay between the number of goods, the number of factors of production, and the specific production processes employed. Singularities, in this context, represent points of instability. These are points where slight changes in parameters could drastically alter the equilibrium outcomes. This led to a deeper comprehension of the shape of the production possibility frontier. This frontier, representing the maximum output combinations a country can produce, becomes intricately linked to the factor price equalization. The theorem illustrated that, under certain conditions, this frontier could exhibit peculiar properties. These were properties that deviated from the smooth, well-behaved curves typically assumed in standard economic models. The structure of this discourse will now proceed by examining the technicalities of the theorem. We will explore its mathematical underpinnings and its implications. We will begin by presenting the precise conditions for the factor price equalization theorem's breakdown. Then, we will provide a detailed explanation of the critical steps and logic of the proof. This will illuminate the core mathematical concepts. Next, the discussion will concentrate on the theorem's specific implications for international trade. This involves its impact on the Heckscher-Ohlin model and the likelihood of incomplete specialization. Furthermore, we will offer concrete worked examples to illustrate the theorem's applicability. These examples will demonstrate the theorem in action. This will focus on specific production functions, those mathematical relationships describing how inputs transform into outputs. The examples will also address particular market conditions that highlight the theorem's relevance. We will thoroughly address the theorem's limitations. Following, we will examine how these limitations served to guide subsequent refinements to the essay will then address the theorem's influence on subsequent research in the domain of economics. This will cover its lasting legacy as an enduring tool for analyzing trade and production. Finally, the essay will conclude by discussing the influences on Samuelson's work. We will identify the works and individuals that helped inspire his theorems. The essay will also address how his theorem has influenced future research in the field. This will solidify its place as a cornerstone in the understanding of international trade dynamics and the behavior of general equilibrium. The year 1970 saw Paul Samuelson's pivotal articulation of what he termed the Fundamental Singularity Theorem for Non-Jointly Produced Multiple Inputs. This theorem, a cornerstone in international trade analysis, offered a nuanced perspective on the factor price equalization theorem, particularly its potential fragility in the presence of diverse production landscapes. At its core, the singularity theorem directly addresses the conditions under which factor price equalization, a central tenet of the Heckscher-Ohlin model of trade, may break down. Factor price equalization suggests that, under certain assumptions such as identical, constant returns to scale technologies, free trade, and the absence of transportation costs, the prices of factors of production, like labor and capital, will tend toward convergence across trading nations. Samuelson's theorem, however, illuminated the circumstances that could subvert this convergence. This involved a careful examination of the relationship between the number of goods produced, the number of factors used to produce them, and the number of production processes available. If the number of goods is sufficient, the number of factors is also sufficient. If the number of factors exceeds the number of possible goods, a singularity in the production possibility set emerges. This singularity implies that the factors of production might remain incompletely specialized, leading to divergent, relative, and possibly absolute factor price. The proof of the theorem, though mathematically intricate, centers around the concept of linear independence within the context of production functions. In essence, Samuelson demonstrated that if the number of production processes is less than the number of factors, a unique solution for factor prices may fail to exist. The production possibility frontier does not conform to a smooth curve, creating flats or singularities where factor price equalization might break down. Essential to this is the concept of non-joint production, whereby the outputs from different production processes are independently determined. This contrasts with joint production, where a single process yields two or more outputs. The theorem then examines the slopes of isequence, the curves depicting the combinations of inputs needed to produce a given output level. The existence of singularities implies that these isequents may intersect in such a way that factor prices are not uniquely determined, and thus not equalized across countries. The theorem's mathematical backbone, therefore, rests on the geometric properties of production sets and the algebraic conditions required for the existence and uniqueness of equilibrium solutions. The implications for international trade theory are profound. The Heckscher-Ohlin model, built on the assumption of factor price equalization, is potentially susceptible to these singularities. The possibility of incomplete specialization, where countries do not fully specialize in the production of goods that intensively use their relatively abundant factors, becomes a central concern. This means that, for example, a country abundant in capital may also continue to produce labor-intensive goods if the number of goods is greater than the number of production processes. This can lead to factor price divergence. The theorem, thus, challenges the robustness of the factor price equalization result, indicating that it holds only under specific and sometimes restrictive conditions related to the technological landscape. Illustrative examples help clarify the theorem's applicability. Consider a scenario with three factors of production: labor, capital, and land. Further, suppose the economy produces only two distinct goods. Imagine one good utilizes only labor and capital, and the second good utilizes only labor and land. The resulting production space exhibits a singularity, for the factors of production can become incompletely specialized, preventing factor price equalization. This illustrates technological constraints represented by these production functions can impede factor price convergence. These examples highlight how the composition of inputs influences factor price movements under varying market conditions. The theorem, of course, possesses limitations. It relies on simplifying assumptions, such as constant returns to scale and the existence of competitive markets. The theorem, by itself, does not account for the role of tariffs, transportation costs, or the impact of technological change over time. Moreover, the theorem can be considered a relatively static analysis, offering a snapshot of equilibrium rather than a dynamic model of adjustment. Subsequently, this work contributed to refinements of the Heckscher-Ohlin model, leading to the development of more sophisticated models that incorporate such factors as transport costs or trade in intermediate goods. The focus shifted to exploring the degree of specialization of production in open economies, and to how technological structures can influence the patterns of international trade. Samuelson's theorem significantly influenced subsequent research. It spurred investigations into the robustness of the factor price equalization. Economists began to explore the conditions under which factor price equalization holds true. It inspired novel techniques for production and trade modeling. This includes examining the impact of technological change and product differentiation. Moreover, it fostered greater scrutiny of assumptions underpinning trade theories. The influences on Samuelson's work originated from earlier contributions to general equilibrium theory. The Heckscher-Ohlin model served as a primary influence. Samuelson's work provided a deeper mathematical understanding of the relationship between trade, factor prices, and production technology. This included a profound appreciation for the elegance of general equilibrium models and a commitment to rigorous mathematical inquiry. This theorem furthered the understanding of international trade dynamics and the behavior of general equilibrium. Samuelson's singular contribution has cemented his legacy in the theoretical foundations of economics.
We really appreciate you tuning in to this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.